This is an introduction to qualitative analysis using a cleaning your closet metaphor. So qualitative data analysis is obviously important. Whenever we get qualitative data, whether we're doing interviews or focus groups, maybe we're analyzing some existing data or we have open-ended questions from a survey, once we have all that data, we need a way to make sense of that data. And so I want to talk through how you do that, but I want to do it by comparing qualitative data analysis and how it's like cleaning your closet. So let's start with the cleaning your closet side. So when you clean your closet, the first thing you do is you take everything out of your closet and you throw it in a big heap so that you know what you're working with. The second thing that you do when you're cleaning your closet is you start sorting through your clothes. And there's actually a few steps that you take when you sort through your clothes. So the first thing you do is you review your clothes as you go. So you have your big pile of clothes, you pick up something from the pile, and you decide, what am I going to do with this particular clothes? So I might start by making some piles. So I might have a keep pile, a keep but repair it pile, a donate it pile, and a throw it away pile. So every piece of clothing I pick up, I'm going to throw into one of those 4 piles. And then once I get all my clothes in those piles, I'm going to get rid of the clothes that don't fit or aren't appropriate for me anymore. So I'm going to start with the throwaway pile. So I'm going to go ahead and take those clothes and throw them away. And then the donate pile, I'm going to put those in my car so that I can take them wherever I'm donating them. And the keep but repair pile, I'm going to take to the tailor, or I'm going to put in a pile so that I can make those repairs later. So now all I have is one pile called keep. So I've gotten rid of the clothes that aren't fit, that aren't appropriate for me anymore, but now I have one giant pile of clothes. So that's not going to help me either. So now I need to take these clothes that are still good for me, and I need to sort them or to categorize them. And so I might, for example, use a category that says casual pants. So I pick up something from the keep pile and I start a new pile that's going to be casual pants. And then the next thing I pick up, I throw in a different pile, and that's going to be my shirts pile. And the next thing I pick up, I'm going to put in the jeans pile. And then I might have dress pants and shorts and t-shirts and sneakers and dress shoes and khakis and casual shoes. So you see, at this point, I'm probably not done coming up with categories yet, but I already have 10 categories. So that's a lot of categories for me to try to actually organize back into my closet. So it probably makes sense for me, once I've come up with all these categories, to re-look at these categories and see if they can be combined in some way. So for example, I might decide that khakis can actually go in the casual pants category. Or I might decide that sneakers can go in the casual shoes category. Or I might decide that I need to come up with a different organizational strategy that combines all those categories. So maybe I just make a category called pants. And inside that category goes my casual pants, my dress pants, my jeans, and my khakis. And I might have a category called tops that has my shirts and my t-shirts. And I might have a category called shoes that has all my shoes, my sneakers, my dress shoes, and my casual shoes. And then I might have a category called shorts because it doesn't really fit in any of the other categories, so I'll give it its own category. Now, I might decide that that's the perfect way to organize, but after I sit with my piles a little bit and think about it, I might decide that I want a whole different organizational structure. So I might have casual and dress and shoes. So in casual, I have all my casual stuff. In dress, I have all my dress stuff. And in shoes, I have all my shoes. Or I might decide I want to organize by winter, spring, summer, fall, and all year clothes. So there isn't one way necessarily for me to categorize my clothes. I need to look at what I have and create categories that make sense for the clothes that I have. All right, so we just finished. We're back here on 2C. We just sorted and categorized all of our clothes. So the next thing for me to do, number 3, is to figure out what's the best way to display or to hang my clothes. So in my closet, I'm going to take all of these categories, whichever one of those category structures I decided on, and I'm going to put them back in the closet in a way that I can make sense of it and anybody else who's using that closet can make sense of it. So that's how I clean my closet. Now, of course, we're really not talking about cleaning our closets. We're talking about qualitative data analysis. So let's switch over to that side. So when we're analyzing qualitative data, the first thing you do is you get all of your data together. So just like you took everything out of your closet, you're going to get all of your data together. Now, you might decide that you're going to look at your data per question. So let's say, for example, you had a survey with some short answer questions. You might look at all the data from one of those questions and then look at all of the data from another one of those questions. So it'd be kind of like if you were cleaning 2 different closets at the same time. You clean one of them at a time. Or I might decide that I'm going to gather my data and look at it per data source. So I might take the first interview that I did and the second interview that I did, or the first focus group and the second focus group. So the next thing I do is I start reading and sorting my data. Just like I started sorting my clothes, I'm going to start sorting my data. So I will have some sort of physical representation of my data. So I'll have either transcripts, or I'll have the answers from an electronic survey of open-ended questions, or I'll have field notes that I took during interviews or focus groups. But whatever it is, I will have some sort of physical representation of that data. And so the first thing that I want to do as I go through my data is I want to review it as I go. So this might take several forms. I might read through my data the first time and I might make notes in the margin of categories or ideas that come to me. I might use what we refer to as the marker or the scissors method. So the marker method is where I take one color of marker and I mark off all of the words or the sentences that seem like they go together or that they're talking about the same thing. With scissors, I actually print out the data, cut it all up into little pieces, and physically put those pieces of paper into categories. But regardless of how you do it, you start by reading and getting familiar with your data, by capturing your initial thoughts as to which categories these go into, and then you're going to start sorting them. So one thing that you want to make sure that you do is get rid of data that do not fit with the purpose of what you're doing. So whether this is a needs assessment or an evaluation or a research project, you have a purpose, you have some questions that are guiding what you're doing. It's possible that in an interview or in a focus group, you get the totally out of left field comment that has nothing to do with what you're trying to answer with the purpose of your particular data gathering. So if it completely does not fit, if it's left field, if it doesn't apply, then you can get rid of it. You cannot get rid of data that just doesn't nicely fit into a category. Right? Once you have data that actually relates to what it is you're trying to do, it relates to your purpose, then you need to figure out a way to make sense of that data. So the next thing that you do, of course, is you sort the data and you categorize the data, just like we did with the clothes. And it's going to be a very similar process. You're going to start by creating categories, and then once you have those categories, you may need to combine categories or to redevelop categories or to completely rethink your organizational scheme. Now, when we talk about creating categories, there's generally 2 ways that we create categories. The first is referred to as a priori, which is prior, it exists prior. That's what that means. So you might get a series of categories from the literature, or you might get a series of categories from a theory. So you might sort your data into something that already exists, into categories that already exist. And with our closet, an example of an a priori category would be winter, spring, summer, and fall. Right? That's a way that lots of people categorize their clothes. It already exists, It didn't matter which clothes we had in our pile. If that's how we were organizing it, we were then using an a priori or an existing set of categories. Much of the time, though, you're going to be using emergent categories, which is to say the categories are going to come from the data. So as you code your data, as you put your markers on it, your magic markers on it, or cut it into pieces, and decide where it goes, the data itself is going to suggest the categories. It's going to be emerging or organically created from the data itself. And like I said, your first set of categories is probably not going to be your last set of categories, because what you need to do is try to figure out what is the smallest number of meaningful and distinctive categories that I can come up with. Just like when I was doing the clothes, it isn't necessarily helpful to have 10 or 20 categories for my clothes. It might be, depending on what I'm trying to do, 10 or 20 categories might make sense. But it also makes sense to see, can I reduce those number of categories without losing the integrity of the data, without losing what the data is trying to tell me? So then the next thing that we need to do, of course, is to figure out the best way to display or present our data. Now, we all know the expression, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and that's true with data display as well. So you're probably going to want to display your data using tables or figures or pictures or graphs or charts or infographics, some visual way for the people that you're sharing the data with to easily grasp the data. Now, you're still going to write it up with words, but many people get a little cross-eyed when they try to read all of the words that describe data. It's much easier for them to just look at a table or look at a picture. So depending on what your data is, you need to figure out what the best way is to display that data. Now, here's where qualitative data analysis and cleaning your closet is different, because we stopped with number 3 with cleaning our closets, but we have a little more work that we do with data analysis. So we do number 4. We synthesize the data and we tell the story of the data. So number 3, those displays or presentation of the data, that tells us what the data says. But when we synthesize the data and create the story, that tells what the data means. So when we synthesize and tell the story of the data, we're not looking question by question or interview by interview, but we're looking across the data. We may also be including the information from what the literature says as we make sense and synthesize and tell the story of the data. We may also be using as I said, information from across the data from all questions as we tell what the story means. And then finally, the last step, if possible, it's useful to verify the data with your data sources, a few of the people who filled out your survey or who you interviewed, or subject matter experts, or even the literature. This is a way just to see if what you came up with seems like it makes sense to the people who provided you with the data or who are experts or based on what the literature says. It doesn't have to match exactly, certainly, but you want to see if you're accurately representing what the people who gave you the data meant to tell you. So that's the process for qualitative data analysis. As we talk about qualitative data analysis, we actually break it into 3 phases. So the first phase is data reduction. So data reduction, you get all your data together, you start reading it, you sort it, and you create categories with it. The second phase of qualitative data analysis is data display. And that's where you figure out the best way to present the data. And then finally, the third phase is data conclusion drawing and verification. So that's where you synthesize and tell the story of the data, say what the data means, and then if possible, you verify the data with some of your data sources or some experts or the literature in order to see if you are in the ballpark and accurately representing what people were trying to tell you. So that's an overview of how you do qualitative analysis and how it's like cleaning out your closet.